talk about MotoGP. And as usual, Dirk Jordan is here. Dirk, what an exciting race weekend we had at Aragon. I mean, I was blown away. Even my son was blown away. And like I said, he's a Formula One guy. He loved it as well. What did you think?
Hello,
Anyway,
India.
yes.
It was a great weekend. I mean, so much drama and great action. Uh, a terrible weekend for the world champion. This really put him back. He's against the ropes right now. We'll have to see how they rebuild his campaign to retain the championship, the title. But then Marc Marquez, I mean, the king of Aragon, he was there again, and this is his track, and he proved it once again. A brilliant weekend for him. So there was a lot happened.
No, you told me he's going to be, he is the king. He loves it
Yeah,
here. He's won many times before, but I never expected him to be this dominant. I mean, he just, came and saw and conquered. Veni, vidi, vici. He
absolutely.
just
Absolutely.
dominated the entire weekend from when the first wheels turned.
Absolutely. As we said, I mean, he's won many times there before at that specific track. He's won there 6 times before this race, 5 of them in the premium class, 4 of those consecutively from 2016 till 2019 on the Honda back then still, before he had his big crash in 2020 at Jerez. So he just knows this track. He loves it. It's an anti-clockwise track as well, which apparently he loves, and it has more left turns as well. That all suits his riding style. He loves hanging off that side of the bike. So he went in and he dominated, as you said, from Friday, all 3 practice sessions completely. So he was set for Q1, started in the front, and he just ran away with it. He qualified 8/10 of a second quicker than anybody else, than the second guy, which just, by the way, is the third biggest gap, the third biggest margin between first and second qualifying in a race since the 4-stroke era began. So that's quite a thing, and that on a GP23,
Yeah.
that it was amazing to see. Pecco Bagnaia, who qualified second, said that, third, sorry, he qualified third, and he said, riding behind Mark, you could see that he was leaning between 4 and 5 degrees more than they were through the corners, which is just crazy, for someone on a track that didn't have grip. If you lose the racing line, you were gone, and B, Mark has fallen a couple of times this year. So I was afraid, especially during the 2 races, that he might lose it, pushing it too hard, but it didn't happen. He was just right there from the beginning in both races, the sprint and the main race. He pulled away, got the whole shot, and they never saw him again. He won the sprint by just more than 3 seconds, or about 3 seconds, and the main race by just about 4 seconds. So a really good showing for the multiple champion. This was by the way, it took him 1,043 days since his previous victory to come back and stand on the top step of the podium. But he did it in brilliant style. His first victory for Ducati, his first triple, by the way. So pole position, sprint win, plus the Grand Prix win. A really great weekend for the Spaniard.
Yeah, the interesting thing about Bagnaia qualifying in third, like you just said, that basically lost him his entire weekend because he was off the racing line and he struggled with his getaways in both the sprint and the main race. And that just sort of put him right at the back. He was under pressure, and the main race, it effectively cost him the race as well, because he had to fight from the back, and then he ended up, let's just jump to that quickly, his accident with Alex Marquez. That was horrifying to watch.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, as you said, things went wrong for him there. He was in the middle of the pack almost in free practice 1 and 2, but during practice 2, which is basically the session where they determine the qualifying grid, he qualified. He did the 6th best spot. Eventually, he qualified in third in going through automatically to qualifying 2, and he qualified in third spot. So he had a decent spot. However, why did that happen? Why did him specifically, why did they slip? As we said before the race, Aragon got a new surface. So you don't have the benefit of a lot of rubber in the tarmac already, So they have to lay down rubber first for it to become properly sticky. They said it was a very abrasive surface, and they thought it might be heavy on the tires and so on. But on the contrary, what happened is that they had a heavy thunderburst on the Friday evening. So Thursday evening as well. So what? Suddenly you sit with water and it brings the dirt to the top of the track. Now, during your warm-up laps and your qualifying, etc., the guys take the racing line. So they basically clean that area, that specific line. But now coming down the main straight where the grid is, they take the racing line, but the other one doesn't get any rubber on. They don't use this part of the track. Now you've got the starting grid and the guys line up diagonally across the first three spots. And that meant that starting in third, he was on the outside and on that dirty part of the track. So in both races, when pulling away, he just slipped terribly. I mean, he went right across the track to the other side in an effort to get grip. But I mean, he was fishtailing all over the place and he fell right back. Then during the sprint, to compound matters, he tried to fight back, but he fell back. And apparently what happened was that they tried a couple of new settings on his bike, telemetry settings and so on, in an effort. I think they feel the pressure from the Pramac camp. I think they are feeling this thing that the consistency of Jorge Martin, and they're starting to fall around and try new stuff. And apparently that's what they did in the sprint. But that cost him. It didn't work for him. So it meant that he fell back further and he ended up in ninth. So now what happens? You go the next day, you think it's going to be better, and it doesn't. You slip again. You have another terrible start. You fall back right, and you have to start rebuilding your race. Now you feel the pressure because of your poor showing in the sprint. He's literally now, he feels that if I want to salvage anything, I need to go for it right now. Marc Marquez dominated proceedings to such an extent that the guys said they knew, Pecco Bagnaia and Jorge Martin, that they shouldn't go for Marc. They shouldn't try to compete with Marc. He's going to run away with the race. So they must concentrate on their own races and focusing on the other guy, because they are the two at the top of the leaderboard. And that's what they try to do. But now Bagnaia falls back at the start. He feels immense pressure and he goes for it to try and recoup that. And in the meantime, Jorge Martin just carries on, falls in behind Marc Marquez and rides a very sensible race. And I think that pressure added a lot to the situation that led up to the big crash and him getting taken out by Alex Marquez.
You mentioned about Marc Marquez having crashed out a lot this year. And when I saw the blue rider flying across the track, I thought, it's Marquez now crashed again. But it wasn't Marc Marquez, it was Alex Marquez. And it was a terrible thing that happened there. Him and Bagnaia literally tangled. There's no better word for it.
Yeah.
And I thought that guy being dragged along under that bike. And what's the fallout from that? Is he injured? What's the F1
well, let's have a look let's have a look at what happened first, and why it happened. As I said, Pecco was coming from behind, but he was gaining. He was gaining between 2 and 4/10 of a second per round at that final stage, gaining on Alex Marquez. Alex was struggling really with grip, the slippery parts of the track and his tires, when they went down, he really struggled. So Pecco gained on him and he was behind him. And then Alex slipped before that long sweeping corner and basically slowed down. So Pecco took the outside line and he went past him. And then he cuts in front of him to take over that racing line in mid-corner. And when Alex comes in, hits him from behind, basically T-bones the rear of his bike, takes a bike out from under him, and Pecco falls under it, and they slide off the track. And fortunately, he wasn't seriously injured, because it could have been, At those speeds, you have a 150-odd kg bike falling on you. If the tires, the spinning tire caught his helmet, could have injured his neck, that sort of thing. He is bruised. He's got a sprained neck, that sort of thing, but nothing seriously, fortunately. We have partly their gear to thank for that, those thick racing leathers, elbow pads, shoulder pads, chest protector, back protector, bubble on the back. Plus, they are air inflated these days. It's like an airbag. The moment you hit something, it inflates, it pops up. And I'm quite sure that aided him. So that was it. They were both out. But obviously now everybody wants to know who's at fault here. We so desperately want to have to blame somebody if something like that happens, and especially if you're a fan of either of those, you want to blame the other one. The stewards adjudged that it was a racing incident, that there was, because of the circumstances and because of the lack of grip, they emphasize that, because of the lack of grip, that influenced the situation as well. So basically, one has to assume what happened was that Pecco went out. He thought he's past Marquez and he's going to take over that racing line, right? So he cuts back into the corner. Alex is on the other side of the bike, and he comes in, and then he doesn't see Pecco taking that specific line, that spot, and he crashes into him because of a lack of grip. That's what caused the whole thing, the accident. But exactly now, if you start to brake on that type of track, you are going to slip as well. Now, if we take a look at the slow-mos and at pictures of that, there's a specific picture, if you look at right, that was taken from the front. And you can see Pecco like leaning into the corner, and you can see Alex behind him upright, and there's smoke on his back tire, which means that's just, he locked up just that last bit. However, the telemetry shows that he was at 60% throttle up until that moment, just before they hit. So that shows you that he was also going for the corner. Now, Pecco says that he should have backed off. He took over the lead. He was in front, and that's a fact. So he should have backed off. Alex says he should have left him at least a meter because he passed him and he knew he was there. So why didn't he leave a meter so that there was a gap in case he needed it? And Pecco just says, but he should have braked. He knew I was there. Alex, on the other hand, says I couldn't see him, and that's quite. It's quite a possibility. I mean, if you are hanging off on the other side, Alex even said that he didn't know who is behind him because his pit board doesn't tell him who's behind him. They just show him the gap, and he can hear the other bike. So he knows somebody's going to try to pass him, but he doesn't know it's Pecco. He doesn't know it's someone that's under pressure for the championship that could take a wild gamble. That's what he insinuated, So it's all these circumstances coming together, and I'm not a real expert, but I think the stewards made the right call, and we should just all be glad that there weren't any serious injuries.
I wanted to ask you, when they walk in those racing suits of them, they walk like very, almost like they scrunched up. Awkwardly is a good word. Why is that? Was that because of the suit?
Yeah, it's because of the stiffness of the suit, of the leather itself, and all the padding. They've got really hard material padding inside, long elbow grips and so on, forearm grips, chest protectors and everything. So you walk like a little robot because you don't really have a choice. And the leather is thick and very hard. You need just the best grade, to protect them. So, well, that was it. So the net effect of that is that Mark won, and then Jorge Martin took second, and Pedro Acosta was he came in third. He benefited from that accident, and he got another podium position, and that strengthened Jorge Martin's position. He's up 23 points on Bagnaia now, and the pressure is firmly and completely on the Lenovo Ducati camp. I think they have real headaches now. Pecco, this is Pecco's second DNF in a MotoGP. He hasn't finished in 4 sprints. Just those, we can't assume that he would have won any of those 2, but if he had, that would have been another 50 points. This one could have been 25 points, or behind Mark, could have been 20, even if he ended behind Martin, which he was going for that third podium position, that would have been 16 points. Now suddenly he's 23 behind. We've got 8 races left, and Jorge Martin has had 3 seconds in sprint and main race in 3 consecutive weekends now. In both the sprint and the main race, he's got seconds. That's consistent. I mean, guys have won championships with less.
I want to ask you about that.
Yeah, Juan Mir won without winning one single race, and guys have won with, well, mainly in other racing formats. But I mean, you win championships like that. So they are under serious pressure now. And what we have now is we have the possibility that they are starting to fall around, that it could dent his self-confidence, Pecco's. It could they could start doing weird stuff with the bike. They already did it during the sprint this weekend. So different things can happen. But true champions, they keep their eye on the ball. So it's going to be definitely an interesting fight.
I wanted to ask you about Martin. He seems to have a bit of a cooler head this year. Settling for second, and rather than fall off his bike or chasing a victory or something like that. That makes a difference.
There was a little bit of a there was a little bit of a dip somewhere where he struggled, but he's back now, and I think he gets aided and abetted by Pecco's misfortune, and by Pecco being really right up there and then falling and not finishing. And if you finish consistently better than the other guy, say only in the sprints. Now, the sprints are only half the points value of a main race. So the focus is on the main race, and Pecco focuses on the main race. That's his thing. That's where he wants to do really well, and that's where he gathers most of his points. But if you consistently do better than the other guy in the other format of the race, racing format, that don't worry about the points. It's going to benefit your confidence hugely, So I think Martinez now, he's seen the picture. And I presume they're telling him that's what you need to do. That's what you need to focus on. We see him hanging back and not going for crazy overtakes and so on when he's in second or third and just taking the points, especially the last about 4 races. He could really benefit from the whole situation. I do think that now Ducati is really glad they signed Marc Marquez. They are worried about Pecco. They are worried about their number 1 rider, the factory rider. But you could see Gigi Dall'Igna's face when Marc won back there in the garage, the head of Ducati Racing. He was so chuffed, You could just see they know now that they did the right thing. Next year, him on a GP25 next to Pecco, it's going to be a great team. And we can see right now that there's going to be no holding back. The two of them are going to gun each other as well. So it's going to be an interesting season and another hectic season, I think.
I wanted to ask you said about Lenovo Ducati now maybe trying different things with the bike, but they've got the same bike as Pramac does, the GP24. Who develops those bikes? Is it the factory, or does each team do its own development on the basic bike? So the Lenovo bike can look different to the Pramac bike towards the end of the season.
Well, they get this. It gets developed by Ducati, but once the season starts, that's your bike. I mean, that's the one that you get. Those 2 bikes. So you have to take it further, and the further development and refinement of the bike is up to you. Now, we have heard them say, Ducati, that they haven't really developed the GP24 any further this season because it's not necessary. It's just a brilliant, almost perfect bike. So they don't need to do that. They focused on the GP23, on the Gresini bikes, and we can see the benefits of that now. But they haven't really messed around with the GP24. However, I mean, the way that you set up the bike makes the tiniest thing makes a big difference. And I think that's what we're looking at here, is just the angles of stuff, the pressures, etc., how they set up the suspension and the headstock angles and those types of things. That changes everything. So that's what they are looking at this stage, because they have the power, they have the grip, they have the speed, they have the handling. It's just how do you apply that? But I mean, Pramac's got exactly the same bike, so it largely depends on the rider at this stage.
Yeah, I get that. All right, now let's talk about KTM. And you just mentioned it in passing. Marc Marquez started 8/10 of a second ahead of the guy in second, but the guy in second was Pedro Acosta on a KTM. And Brad didn't do too badly either. Tell us about KTM's weekend.
Yeah, well, basically, let's start with Brad then. Basically, he struggled during qualifying. Now, the reason for that, he had to go through Q1 first and then into Q2. He didn't go through automatically. He wasn't in the top 10 during the practice session on Friday. Now, why that happened is just before his last really quick flying lap that's what they do. They learn the track, they get the tires right, they get the tires hot, the track develops because of the rubber getting laid down, etc. And then right at the end of the last 2 or 3 minutes, they do one or maybe two really quick laps. So before his last flying lap, there was a yellow flag because of an accident. So he forfeited that really speedy lap of his. So he fell back and he had to take part in Q1. So he did put up the best time in Q1. Pedro Acosta was second, the second best time. So the same thing happened to him. So they went through to Q1 now. And then Acosta goes right up there, you know. He qualifies second quickest. That behind that huge lap of Marc Marquez, that says something. The rookie did really well. Interesting fact is that Pedro Acosta's team manager, his team boss, said that Acosta benefited from the fact that he had to take part in Q1. Usually you don't want that. You don't want that. You just want to go through to Q2, except maybe if the track is weird, if there are weird track conditions. For example, some of the guys like that as well, to take part in Q1 if the track was wet, to see exactly where those racing lines are as the track dries out. And this was a similar situation because of the dirt on the track. And he said that Acosta took part in Q1, and that because of that, he learned exactly which lines to take. The other guys, who came through to Q2 automatically, still had to suss out the track, you know. And so he did really well, qualified in second. And he had a really great race. He got overtook, but after the big crash, he benefited from that and he moved up into third. So really, really good one for the rookie. He moved back up 3 points above Brad Binder because of that. Now, Binder, as I said, he struggled to qualified well, okay, and then he had the same problem as Pecco. He was on that side of the track, or on a part of the track that was very dirty, and he slipped and he fell right back in both races. Exactly the same thing happened in both races, and he had to fight from almost mid-pack, you know, for a decent position. Once again, he also benefited from the big crash, moved up those positions, but he got a sixth and a fourth, respectively, in those two races. So it was a decent weekend for the KTM garage. Binder was satisfied. He said they couldn't have done more, and he's looking forward to the next race, the stuff that he usually says. But they had a decent weekend. Interesting for me, though, is that the spin-off of this is that there's now a 2 points difference between KTM and Aprilia. Aprilia is still on top of above them on the manufacturers championship ladder, which is interesting.
I talk about Aprilia. They did not have a great weekend at all.
No. I mean, nobody knows where they were. Yeah, that was just terrible weekend. Sure. The only rider that they had that was up there, I mean, fell. So yeah. They had a really difficult weekend.
So let's say Martin wins the championship and then he has to go to Aprilia. That's either very good or not there at all. It's a bit inconsistent, I always think. Yeah, maybe they pulls them up by the bootstrap. Maybe it's a good thing.
Yeah. That's a distinct possibility, you know, that could happen. I think a lot of this is due to rider error, etc. And the guy's not gelling with the bike. The only one that's really on top of it all season is Aleix Espargaro. He had a decent showing this weekend as well in practice and qualifying, but he wasn't anywhere in the race, though.
All right, next up is San Marino Grand Prix.
Yes.
Martin likes that one. Tell me about that.
Yeah, well, he won there last time. His tail would be up now. You know, he would be really full of confidence, having won or having had good showings in the last 3 races, plus now having won last year at that specific track, Misano. So we can see he will really go for it this weekend. I think there might be a distinct possibility of him getting the pole position as well. We know how good he is in the sprint, etc. But then, having said that, Pecco, on the other hand, has won the 2 years prior to that. So he will know that he can do it at this track. It all depends on him. It's just that confidence thing. How are they going to set up the bike? B, how is he going to qualify, you know? And what's he going to do in the sprint race with an injury, albeit being slight injuries, you know? He still has to come back from that. And I think the most important thing is, what does he do mentally?
Mm.
How does he refocus himself, knowing that this is the first of the last 8 races of the season and he's under real pressure? So real champions can refocus and can come back, and we'll see. But it's going to be interesting. It's going to be quite possibly a 2-horse race there with some guys just meddling in their affairs.
Mm. Do you expect anything from Marc Marquez for the rest of the season? Just a matter of any tracks that suit him, like Aragon?
Yes. I mean, such a confidence booster, and he's on top of that bike really now. I mean, they've developed it for him. I mean, the GP23, they developed it with him in the saddle and him giving them feedback. So there could be just constant improvements there. I don't know whether we're going to see him with another victory. And he has been fighting almost for the, just below podium level all the time. He got a couple of podiums in the sprint races and so on. So he's going to be in there, but I don't think he's 70 points behind Jorge Martin on the championship ladder. I don't think there's a real possibility of him taking the championship, for example. That's Spanish wishful thinking over there. Yes. Just a quick word about this specific weekend and this track. We are having 2 consecutive races at that track. So the one after is also going to be at this track because the Indian Grand Prix fell away and they gave it to Misano as well. So what the effect of that is going to be is this weekend could also be a really big learning experience and practice session for the weekend after. This one could set the guys up for maybe 2 victories in a row or whatever, or great improvements, because you stay at that track, you don't even travel, so they could, some of the riders could benefit from that.
Is it directly afterwards?
No, it's 2 weeks.
2 weeks.
I think.
Interesting. Yeah, I see. Yeah, it's Emilia Romagna Grand Prix. Okay, it's same as Formula One. Okay,
yeah,
that's very interesting. That's very interesting. So they just cancel the race. They just gave it to someone else. Well, seeing that you're in.
Yeah, well, they're trying not to lose races, off the calendar. So, and this one makes sense. They are already there,
And it's a good track.
Open, so just do it. And it's a really, really good track. Yeah.
Okay, Dirk, thanks, man. I look forward to this weekend. See what happens. Like I said, there might be a nice dress rehearsal for the 2 weeks after on the same track, which I don't know about. That's interesting. It's going to be getting exciting towards the end of the season. I like it.
Oh yes. Oh yes. Oh yes. It always is. It always is. But I think it's going to go down to the wire, as they say.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Good. We'll talk again next week. Watch out for that. And thanks. I appreciate you talking to me.